Are you setting up any tree stands right now? Now it's May for us, mid-May, and May is a month that I consider water hole month, where this is a great time to set up your water holes. Get them in the ground, and then going through, the deer have plenty of time to get used to them, but especially they have time to establish a pattern of use from dry bedding on the way to a food plot. But at the same time, this is a great time to set up tree stands. I set up tree stands for that perfect morning hunt or that perfect situation, even if it's an evening sit. I love finding my next great morning hunt, and I'm setting up a tree stand early. There's been many of my mature bucks that have been shot in the morning, first time using that stand, and even the first time going back to that stand since I actually set it up in May. So this is a great time to set your tree stands up as you extend into June. Any of the cuttings you make just kind of blend into the habitat. Any down trees, branches, limbs that you're cutting out, this is a great time to get your tree stands in. Now there's 5 rules, 5 hot tips that I can give you for setting up your next great tree stand location this year. And I want to mention real quick, always, and why I'm planning moving forward and why we're putting these in the first place, is your favorite tree stand, your best tree stand location should be the next tree stand that you shoot a big buck out of, that you have a great hunt out of, that you experience a great hunt of, not the last one. Always be looking forward. Never get settled into a certain tree stand thinking I'm going to shoot a big buck here every single year that's going to give me a hot hunt. There's a lot more to hunting and a lot more that your land or even public land has to offer by setting up several great stand locations on a small parcel and making sure that you can take advantage of them. The first hot tip that I can give you, and there's been at times where I think I've had, back to the old tree step days, 400 to 500 steps in different trees. I know I've had at least 50 plus stands out at a certain time. I know I've set up hundreds of stands, and I've always only hunted my own stands. So literally hundreds of stands that I've sat in many different properties stretching back to the mid 80s. Some setups that I shouldn't have had, some setups that were truly unsafe to actually hunt. The first rule, the first tip I can give you is the 90-degree rule. And this is something that I see on client properties. I try to talk to clients. It's part safety, part ease. I don't want to have to. I've been to a stand before. I've seen stands where the steps end on the backside and someone has to shimmy and move around to get to that tree stand on the other side, that hanging stand, and just not a very good idea. I like the 90-degree rule, meaning my ladder's right here. That means that tree stand is going to be facing this way. Just 90-degree step over. So ladder goes up on this side, and I'm just stepping over 90 degrees to get into that stand. Same thing as if I was facing that way with my stand, then I'd climb up here. My stand would be on this side, just 90 degrees away from this ladder's facing. Very, very easy to step over, very safe way, and that's one of my number one rules. I see those stand locations where someone has to shimmy around to the outside, and it just spooks me out. Even if they have a lifeline, they're just setting themselves up for a problem. So try that 90-degree rule. So easy to do. You just climb up, step over on hanging stand, and it's right there. You know, one of the reasons you're using that, or I like using a 20-foot climbing ladder like this from Family Traditions, is a very high-end ladder stick right here. You notice there's no pins to keep these pieces of ladder together. They have a female end sitting in the male end. They're very heavy duty, so even if there's a slight bend in the tree, you'll notice that when you ratchet these 400 to 800 pound ratchet straps to the tree every 4 feet, you'll find that this can actually bend with the contour of the tree slightly, and you're not damaging the ladder in any way. I like to climb up the back side of the tree from where I expect the deer to be moving. We have a water hole that way. We have really good deer movement on this outside over here. So I'm climbing up the back side. In here we have the good fortune of we're in a white pine. We can climb up on any side and those deer aren't going to see us. We're completely hidden in here. But I like climbing up the back side, and then I just simply step over 90 degrees onto that platform. Very slight movement. You're already 20 feet in the air, and I find that's a great way to hide your movement and keep your movement hidden all the way up the tree. Very, very important. And that's why I have a hard time with ladder stands sometimes. They're very safe. Probably 50% of my clients use them. But kind of imagine coming to a deer movement that travels left to right, a water hole, whatever it might be. You get there safely, you get there securely, you have great access, and then you get to the tree stand and you have to walk all the way around with your rear end to the line of movement, to the water hole, to the mock scrape, to the bedding area, whatever it might be, and then climb up that ladder. So a lot better if you can climb up the backside of the tree and just move over, and that hidden climb and getting into that tree non-invasively is very important. And if you have that if you're observing the 90-degree rule, when you're first setting that stand up, then it works out great. The one problem is if you have a lefty in the bunch. And so if I'm setting the stand up, my shot's off to the side of my stand right here, I prefer to sit down when I shoot a deer. Most of my deer that I shoot, I sit down. I don't want to move at all. I certainly don't want to move from one side of the tree to the other. I don't want to have my tree stand or my bow hanging here and have to move it all the way around to the other. I want to be able to sit and shoot. In the last resort, I have to stand up if that deer's on the wrong side, which if you're defining your habitat improvements and your hunt, even on public land, they shouldn't be on that wrong side. The last buck I shot in Ohio with my bow on public land, I just stayed seating as that deer went by. I didn't have to move at all. The doe and fawn didn't notice me up in the tree. Very important to stay hidden at all times, and that includes trying to get the shot out of your tree. Now, the third point I want to make, you have hidden climb, you have a 90-degree rule, is to make sure you're watching deer that pass by. If they're just stopping in front of you in a big open food plot for a half hour or more, and they're not passing by, then that is a sign that you're going to experience some problems in that stand, and the deer eventually picking you out or seeing you try to shoot when you pull back your bow on a big food source. The deer are passing by, that's always a great rule to follow. You're not just watching something where they're going to stay there for a half hour or more. A pass-through habitat improvement that could be included in a pass-through is a water hole, maybe even a mock scrape. Deer just hitting that and then they're just moving through. We have a big food plot right over there. I can see through these limbs. It's about 90 to 100 yards away. So I can get in from this side, and if there are deer out there, they're never going to know that I'm walking up this side of the tree and I'm not spooking them on that food plot right over there. Our pass-through is right up here and on the side and down to this water hole and then to the food. So we've defined this. The water hole's approximately 40 to 50 yards off the food. There's a good movement. We have holes up here where we can shoot down to that. And very effective because we're watching pass-through deer. We can get shots at them in this location. Diane, my wife, has actually had a couple of really nice bucks come through here the last couple of years, and she had some real close opportunities. And let's just say she didn't shoot them, didn't hit them, and but it was she's enjoyed sitting in the stand. It's one of her favorite stands that we have out of all the properties and all the stand locations. So make sure your deer are passed through. They're not sitting on that food plot for a long period of times. They're not coming to an apple orchard, for example, where they're going to be there for many minutes and not allow you to get out of that stand. So very critical. Now the fourth point I want to make is this happens to be, by chance, the best tree, size of tree, cover of tree that we could find out here on this entire parcel. This is a beautiful white pine. Some of my favorite stand locations have been in big white pines, big red cedar, big white cedar, big spruce, where I have that ultimate form of cover all the way around me, and you feel very secure in that tree. When you look up from the outside, we shot some video footage earlier, and when you look into that hole and I'm sitting up in that tree stand, I literally am part of that hole that's in that tree. You just blend completely in. The deer have no clue ever that you're here. We've had to move just 5 yards away from the tree. You can get away with a lot of movement up here. But just because this is a big, beautiful tree is not the reason we put the tree stand here. There's some ugly trees around here we could have used too. Skinny trees, deer where you're skylit. We have a couple over on some fence rows over here. And the point I can make on this, really important, this fourth point out of these tree stand tips, is that you want to be in the best tree available, which may or may not be your favorite tree on the property. So many times I've shot deer from leaners, from trees that do not have a lot of cover in them. And again, if you're hiding your access, your climb, so you climb in and out, you're not spooking those deer. And you're using the tree to your advantage by walking up the backside. And then if you're watching just deer pass through and pass by, and you're not pushing those deer, you're not spooking those deer, they're just passing by for a moment, you can get away with sitting in a very poor tree. Again, make sure when you're picking out the tree, kind of like a soil map on a food plot, you don't just look at a soil map. That was the old thinking. I actually heard that on the Outdoor Channel. Find your best soil, plant a food plot. That couldn't be further from the truth. That's no different than finding your favorite type of tree on your land and just sticking a tree stand in it for no reason at all. Watching that pass-through movement, pick best tree, best location, not necessarily your favorite type of tree on the land. Now I'm going to stick a fifth point in here that's kind of random, but your stand location, you have to be able to move without spooking deer. I like a portable stand because I can sit on that portable stand. My feet are firmly planted on a dead quiet tree stand. We use family tradition that doesn't squeak, doesn't ping, doesn't move. And I can stand up slowly and I can turn around and shoot behind the tree with very, very little movement. I can turn around and shoot to my right with very, very little movement. I'm not rubbing, I'm not scraping against that tree. I'm extended out away from that bark there. The tree does not make any noise. I can get in and out of it without making noise. So very important, just choosing a tree stand wisely that you can move around. I'm leery of you're facing the tree. You know, there might be a holder on this side. Well, what happens if you had to take your bow, move all the way around the tree and go this way? And if you're scraping that tree, my setups are strictly set for mature buck hunting. If you do that, then every other deer that walks by is easy, but they'll pick you out. If they're on a doe, they might have a mind of their own. They don't really care. But a lot of times, any little noise, any little ping, any little shuffle against the bark, if you have to move a great distance, you're not going to get that deer. So it's very important that you set up for that sitting shot. And then I have had to use stand up and shoot from that location. So if that stand makes any type of noise, if you slide against a tree, if you have to bring yourself out and around that tree to shoot this way, you're not going to be able to make that shot on a mature buck most of the time. And we all have a percentage of shot failure. You're making the shot, you spook a deer, you get a bad shot. We all have that failure built into us based on our experience and level as a hunter. Take everything else out of it, meaning the noise, the movement in the stand, and making sure you're shooting that pass through. And that's the fifth point I can give you, is that use tree stands, use your tree stand setups, how you're putting them in the tree, position them so you can actually shoot a mature buck when he comes through. That failure rate should be 0. You should be able to get a shot off on that mature buck when he comes through. A lot of that boils down to how your stand's positioned, what kind of stand you're using. And finally, this is tip number 6, tip number 5, whatever you just threw that other one in. Always use a lifeline. I started using, embarrassingly, I did not use a lifeline until my boys were actually sitting in the stand about 5, 6, 7 years ago. I did use a safety harness. I was religious about that. But being able to be hooked into the ground, you know, hooked on to this tree before I even step foot off the ground. So I'm hooked in when I'm on the ground right here. Being able to use this all the way up and down the tree made me feel so much better about my kids and my wife Diane going out in the tree. And then here I wasn't even thinking about myself since the late 80s. And there's times we shimmied up trees because we didn't want someone to steal them. So we didn't use any steps for the first 10, 12 feet. I've had times where I've fallen, my ring is actually, you know, last step, second last step pulls out, my ring got caught on a jagged step that's cleated. And I'm stretched out to where if it would have been one step more, it'll rip my finger off. Always stay connected right from the ground. To me, there is absolutely zero excuse, especially when the cost of a lifeline is so cheap compared to everything else we do, compared to the tree stand, the bow, the equipment, the clothing, whatever it might be, the food plots, the plantings, what you're having completed on your land, and even if you're going on public land. It's a very quick and easy step to take to ensure your life, ensure that you can make it for the rest of your life and enjoy hunting and be around your kids and family. That is the last step I give you. You want that 90-degree rule. You want to be hidden when you're climbing in. You want to pass through. You want a stand that will actually make zero noise when you're up in it. You want to pick the best location, which may or may not be the best tree in the area. And finally, use a lifeline. I think you'll enjoy it this year. I've gotten to the point where I didn't connect a couple times. Just for whatever reason, I get up to actually connect my safety harness. There's nothing to connect to because this is down at the bottom. I've actually relowered everything, gone down so that I could have that security in my sit. That's what I've gotten used to over the last several years, and I encourage you to have a safe hunting season this fall. And I hope these tree stand tips will help you as you're setting up your tree stands throughout this off season.